Good evening, it's Joyful Hermit. Well, I tell you, we'll try again. This video is on my prayer life. And so it's going to be a perspective, a compendium of progressive of prayer, because my prayer life has changed over the years. And I'm cold tonight, and I'm very nauseated, and I don't know why exactly. But I've got the castor oil all slathered on my gut with a half a puppy pad over it, and then my heat pack on it, trying to get some of the pain down and the swelling, the distension down. So that's what my lump here is for. I'm not pregnant, just so you don't worry about that. Anyway, and also on joy, somebody was writing and put Joyful Hermit LOL because I'd written, a little synopsis of my life and stuff, which is not at all what we perceive as joyful. It's been a horrific life. It's a life I never thought I would ever have to live. And that's before this Scripps La Jolla surgeon back in 1988, he told me that I would have to learn to live a life that I never dreamed I'd ever have to live. After he looked at my post-op as a second opinion surgeon after my spine surgery, the one in which I died in recovery, and God sent me back, but back here to live then. And in essence, he's having me live now. This was the week that I thought I would be told that I had 6 to 9 months left or something, if that. So, but joy, yes, joy and suffering in joy. And a wonderful viewer put a new, a video, it's not new video, but a video. It's in the comment section and on suffering with joy and different aspects of that. So I'm going to watch that video tonight. I always like to hear what's recommended and other people's perceptions of joy and suffering in joy. And what I'm now doing is praying and trying to perceive joy as God sees joy and as God understands joy, what his view of joy is. And I'm suspecting it's going to be different than our human perception of joy. Because we can really get sort of hung up on joy from our perspective of it. But we'll find out. We'll find out what it is. And then to live out our suffering in whatever way we are able. So it'll be interesting, I think very interesting, in fact, about joy and suffering in joy, or in whatever we perceive is joy, to suffer with that perspective. So we'll find out what other people also think about it and perceive it as being. So my prayer life. Well, when I was a little child, I was taught bedtime prayer, and I wasn't Catholic until I was 44. I did pray, I remember in junior high, one of these very deep prayers, one of these gut-wrenching kind of prayer. And I did from about 4th grade into 6th grade. For about over 2.5 years, I prayed every night a heartfelt prayer for my dad to stop drinking. And I didn't let up. And then in February of I wasn't quite 12 yet. I was in 6th grade. He called me in on a Saturday afternoon into Mom and Dad's bedroom and told me very seriously, quietly, that he was sorry he had been a drinker, but that he had stopped drinking. And he showed me his little AA medallion and repeated the serenity prayer and said that he wasn't going to be a drinking dad anymore. And I was just so relieved and overjoyed. Now, in that overjoy, I didn't show anything expressive wise. I think I told him I was very happy, how good news. But I was stunned. I didn't say much. My dad was, especially through his drinking era, when I started to know that he had that problem, for sure, when I was in fourth grade, it was deeply distressing to me. And I was a little afraid of my dad. And I was afraid of him before then, too, because I picked up, obviously, that he could be erratic in things. A couple of times he spanked me, and I thought, what had I done? What? It was just spontaneous kind of spanking me. And probably he was drunk and didn't like my exuberance or something when he came home from on a Friday afternoon. That was one time. And another time, getting ready for school, he just came in and spanked me. Well, I was playing some, but it wasn't like I was late or anything like that. But that bothered him. And people who drink can have a very short fuse sometimes with their temperament. But after sixth grade on, he never drank again. And, well, it's February of sixth grade. And I turned 12 then in April of that year. So that was I was so proud of my dad. And he took me to an AA meeting once. But that was really the most intensive, heartfelt. Every night in bed, I prayed. And I prayed and I prayed. And I know my grandmother was praying. My mom, she talked to us about thinking of leaving him, and we all begged her not to wait. And I think my mom mentioned that our grandmother was praying and others were praying, and I said I knew I would pray. I said I would pray. We'll pray. And I'm sure my sisters did. I don't know if every single night or what. Probably, maybe, I don't know. But I know I did. And that was an experience of intensive prayer that I had. And then in eighth grade, I remember being in an auditorium. My mother was a drama teacher in addition to English, and her students were putting on a play. And I was waiting for it to start. And I just had this deep, heartfelt prayer to God that I wanted to do something great for God with my life. I wanted to do something great for God with my life. I didn't know what it was. I wanted him to let me know. And that went on, that desire, even in college, but I got way off in college, and I wasn't in the right degree. I wasn't in the right college. I didn't know what it was I wanted, other than I knew I wanted to have children, to be a mother, and to be married. That experience I wanted. And being Protestant, that was either it or not be. So there weren't religious orders to consider, religious callings. So I was not privy to that world or that idea. That was one of those. I started recognizing when I would do these gut felt prayers deep in my heart that would just well up as if out of nowhere. And that's the kind of prayer I did a couple of weeks before the accident in 1984, in second week of August or a little before. Maybe it was around August 10th or so or 8th, that I had this urge. I remember exactly where I was standing in our bedroom in the afternoon. I'd just gone in there for something and I stopped, and I just had this prayer well up in me. It was a mental prayer, and I said, Lord, I know my life doesn't seem like it's somehow going in a direction you want. Do with me whatever you will. Do with me whatever you want. And help me. Help me do what it is you want with my life. And boom, my life turned upside down after that accident. And it kept turning until he had me out of the teaching, out of education, out of any kind of temporal work. But he wanted me at home. I was at home for my children, even though I was maimed at home and in lots of pain. And he wanted me back in the Midwest. That he made very clear. All these visions and everything started to be very pronounced after that. And especially after the husband left and we got relocated away from a more worldly environment. So that was I was starting to distinguish types of prayers. And I prayed through college and I prayed before I married a lot. But there's praying and listening, and there's praying and not listening. And I didn't listen to parental advice of waiting. I had little nudges, little nudges. I was used to nudges of the Holy Spirit, but I didn't recognize them as such. But I'd have these nudges, these little red flags or instincts. I guess I would look at them as that. Now it would be my guardian angel or the Holy Spirit, either one of them or both, trying to get my attention and warn me of things. But that took more knowledge and awareness. After I became Catholic, I became more aware of all these things and a vocabulary that explained different experiences that I didn't have the vocabulary or the knowledge prior of what it was. And once, at least with me, I'd have the knowledge and the vocabulary and understanding of what these things were that were happening, I could learn to pay more heed, more attention, and work with it more. So my prayer then, really, even as a single person, now that it developed a lot more. And by then, I was not just verbal or mental prayer, actually not much. I was more contemplative. At night, after the children were in bed, or when I'd be having a pain siege, and I'd be the one in bed, and they were, my older two, especially the oldest, they were handling things with their little brother and themselves. Many nights, they would be up and I would be in bed with pain. So, but the praying I was doing in that suffering was more of the contemplative type, but I didn't know that at the time. But it had moved on already from the verbal and the mental prayer. It would start out mental and then go into not sure where I was or what, but more experience of God, of His presence, and in another realm of not even being aware of that, but after realizing I didn't know where, I didn't have any cognizant actual thoughts unless there had been a word or an answer or a little glimpse of an image, such as yesterday when I was reading and talking about Pseudo-Macarius, this man who I was really led to picking up where I had left off 13 years ago in his great letter of Pseudo-Macarius. Don't even know his name, he's just known by Pseudo-Macarius, because he writes sort of like Macarius of Egypt, but he's really a Syrian monk. They're sure he's a Syrian monk of Mesopotamia. And in the 4th century, they've got his century down, but he's not Macarius. They just don't know his name. And call him Pseudo-Macarius for literary and theological and research purposes, historic purposes. Gave him a name, Pseudo-Macarius. And as I was reading his words and also thinking about how amazing that this man 1700 years ago was his writings, his thoughts, what he had learned in life spiritually, and what God had taught him and told him to write, not maybe in word for word, but in essence, how much it was helping me yesterday to know my purpose and in succinct words and thoughts, and to know my goals for whatever time I have left. So, which could be a few years, don't know. 2, 3, 5, not going to be super long. I'm old. So, that's an encouragement to sort of, toward the end of the race where you get this extra push, or toward the end of a project, you have to dig down deep and bring up this extra push. So, but I saw, God showed me up part of his face, how he looked when he was alive. While I was talking, I didn't mention it in the video, but I actually even saw his nostril and his nostril hair. What a real man he was in the skin tone, the Middle Eastern, and the ruggedness of life then in the 4th century. And I saw his nose and the nose hair in it, and I could smell and feel the breath from his nose. It was just a flash, an image flash of this man as he looked when he was alive. And the awe that was put in my soul of the wonder, the miracle of how these people left their wisdom and their writing for us and their helps to us. But they're alive now. They're alive now. So all of that happened. And that also can start happening when you're in contemplative prayer. As you're going into the contemplative prayer, you aren't aware really, but there might be a flash of a word or a flash of an image of some sort. Most of the time it goes so quickly you might not even hold on to it or stop to think about it or what it is. But it's okay if you do. Allow yourself that second or moment to recognize that you just saw something and what it was. And thank God for it, because it really filled my soul with a depth of understanding of how people, we are alive. Because I've had people comment, why do you talk to dead people? Somebody who doesn't understand has left a comment like that a couple times. Couple different people. Well, they're not dead. We don't talk to dead people. They're not dead. They're physically not on earth anymore, but they're very much alive elsewhere. Their souls are alive, and everything goes with the soul except the body. And it's thought flashing, it's images, it's real. And it's beautiful and very meaningful. Everything is much easier. So that's some of the praying that was going on after, I was alone with my children, and And then more so even after the death experience with the spine surgery and when I was permanently disabled with pain and these pain sieges I would have, God wanted to keep me out of the temporal world. He didn't want me teaching. He didn't want me working out there. And it was hard. It was hard. And I've struggled with that. And he told me one time in what Dr. H had tape recorded, that I'm too easily drawn back out into the world. So that's something I need to pray about. But as far as I was in a Bible study group or a woman's book study group with this Lutheran church back in 1985 to 90, that time frame. And for a year or two, they would come and go, be for a certain length of time, this study or that study with church women. And we had adult Bible study, but I was on the church prayer chain, and this women's group had a prayer chain. And so I would pray and I like to pray. And I would keep a journal, diary. I wrote. And I would keep a list of the prayer needs of people. And I would pray at certain times, or not so much disciplined, but definitely either at night or in the morning or off and on throughout the day. And so that was the type of praying I did, was mostly for other people, intercessory prayer. And I also then started reading some books. Like I at one point read Teresa of Avila's Way of Perfection. I saw it at the Christian bookstore. It was listed as a classic and didn't say Saint Teresa, it just was Teresa of Avila. So, that's, if it had said saint, maybe I wouldn't have gotten it. I don't know. Because I was reared, Catholics, no, stay clear. But I had been drawn to Catholicism already at that point. So I did read Richard Foster's book, A Celebration of Discipline, which heavily quoted Thomas Merton, and then I read his conversion book. So it was that kind of praying, just, prayer intentions. We would have prayer at the adult Bible study on Sunday mornings, then pray for people. People would give their prayer needs for the week or things. So we would have a verbal prayer time. And I read scripture a lot. Every night I was reading scripture once the children were in bed, and when I was able to read, if I weren't in a pain siege. So, I got a lot of answers from God through scripture. Even in dreams, he would tell me a book to read of the Bible or something. So, and a lot of visions and dreams, lots of dreams that were answers to prayer. I would pray and ask something, ask for help for this or that, and God would respond with a sort of a mystical experience that would explain or help me know what to do. That's how he guided me then a lot. And I was open to that because I was so worn out during the day and in so much pain. Pain can be a very big distraction from being able to hear and to see to use our inner senses, our inner sight, our inner hearing. Our inner images shut down more when we're in pain or have responsibilities like I had, 3 little children, and financial hardships and trying to get disability, all this temporal stuff that had to be taken care of, even though I knew God was going to provide for me. I knew that. But it was still a stressful time period. My faith wasn't strong. No, it wasn't that strong. But it was genuine. I think God loved me so much because I was so interested, and genuinely so. And he knows and knew then I love him very much. And I needed help, and I asked for lots of help. that was a lot of my praying, was asking for help, calling out loud even for help from God. So, or for somebody like my grandmother, help me, grandmother, I need your help. So we had her appear. So that was prayer, actually. And let's see. So then I was in prayer groups when I went back to the Midwest, got the children back to the Midwest, to my hometown, and was in a prayer group of mostly elderly women. But I was invited and I went and I loved it. And we just had prayer needs from all over the community. And I would write all those down and take them home and pray every day for them, or more than once a day. If they'd be on my mind, they would come up many times. And mentally, so it wasn't necessarily a formal prayer, but a thought, a loving thought of concern, a loving thought of asking God, please be with this person, heal this person, thy will be done, all of that. The thoughts, it would just be free-flowing thoughts that were prayer within me. Sometimes aloud, the children would be at school and I might say aloud, Lord, please be with so-and-so right now. And from prayer names of people that had been told me, or situations in the world too, to pray for those. And then for my children, I would always pray for my children. Usually at night, after they were in bed, I would go through the day and their needs, and my parents, family, anybody, whoever would come to mind. And at times I could be bombarded with people because I was insulated for the most part. And that was right after my husband left, really, as a single woman. All of a sudden, your social network is thrown upside down. You're no longer with your couple friends. And I had some single friends, but not many. And I had an older friend who was married, who remained my friend. And that was good. Well, actually, two of those. And one of my sisters was closer during that time period. And my mother and father became closer. I relied on them a lot. And so it was just a different time period. But I was really more alone than ever in my life. And I'd moved to a new area where I knew a few people. It was near an area where I knew other people. But I didn't realize how it would be for a divorcee, say in a Missouri Synod Lutheran church. I was the first and only one. And I was 34, attractive, single, divorced, and a threat to all the women in my age range. So, and they were married, I'd forget them. Then an older woman became divorced, and then a couple of years after that, a woman, she was older than me, but not a lot. And so there were three of us. But I was still more of a threat in various ways. But after the surgery, where I was maimed and I wore this big, huge hardback brace, it was amazing. The women in my age range calmed down. I was not the threat anymore. I suppose, they looked at me as so maimed that I wouldn't be running off having sex with their husbands, which I wasn't interested in any of them, guaranteed. Not my type, not interested. I wasn't a housebreaker type. So, but there was, so anyway, I'm getting off topic there, but that was sort of the milieu that I was in. So I had more time for why so many names of people, even from my past, or from my town when I grew up, or people I had encountered along my path of moving many places with my husband, who was always getting a new job every 2 to 3 years, and I didn't realize it was, he would lie in his interviews, and he was a good worker. He was an excellent principal and superintendent, but he was a major womanizer also, so we'd get moved along. And I didn't know why, but he also would want to apply for a new job because he would know his time was running out on him for what he was doing and getting himself into trouble. He was either going to be cut off or he better find another job in a hurry. So he would do that. And I didn't realize why. I just thought he was, wanting to advance, which he did. So that's the kind of praying I did. And it wasn't until I became Catholic that I got more into verbal and mental prayer and devotionals, different types of devotion prayers, and the rosary. So that was an introduction to a different kind of praying. And I then, through the next many years, I really didn't pray for long, the verbal prayers. I memorized them all. I learned them, the various different prayers. I particularly liked Charles de Foucault's prayer of abandonment. I memorized that. St. Teresa of Avila's prayer. Let me not disturb thee, I think it's called that. It's in the back of the breviary. This prayer by Teresa of Avila. And poem or prayer, whatever you want to call it. Some other prayers that I enjoyed. And then the rosary, I had to learn that. I didn't have to, but I wanted to. Very eager to, in fact. And I learned what it, I had trouble meditating on the life of Christ per se, plus say the words at the same time, the Hail Mary, the Lord's Prayer, and have attention to it all at once. And I don't know if that's partly because I had strabismus, where I just use one eye or the other at one time. So I couldn't really play piano well because it's using two hands and both sides of the brain and my eye, using one eye or the other, even to read the notes. So I really, I had trouble. And after several years, probably 10, I didn't pray the rosary as much. And I talked it over, and it was afternoon mass or something, they would pray the rosary. People would stay behind and pray it. And I noticed one time I just looked around and the leader was just going lickety-split through the words. Everybody's boom, 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 boom. And it was just like cacophony of sound, utterances coming out. You could barely understand the words of the prayers, the Our Father, the Hail Mary, and the Glory Be to the Father. You could barely understand because people were just boom, 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 in unison, trying to be in unison, but going so fast. And I thought, are they even able to focus on what we're supposed to be mentally meditating on? Because I couldn't at all. So that I just grew out of praying the rosary. It ceased being of anything that I was drawn to do. A woman would come and she wanted to go walk with me and pray the rosary, and we would, and walking and plus repeating the words plus trying to meditate. Too many functions for me. And again, maybe it's something to do with the strabismus or my brain, the way my brain is or something. But I just do better with other forms of prayer, with contemplative prayer. That's more natural for me. And I don't know that I'm doing it. Like, I set the intention before I painted this ceiling today for the third time, thinking it would be the last time. And I don't recall what thoughts I had at all, but I know that I had the intention of praying. At this point, I just, my thoughts are talking with God all the time. It's just how it is. It's not conscious anymore, but the thoughts are in relationship and in communication with God. That's what prayer has evolved to for me. But back to the rosary part, I talked to my spiritual da when this was happening. And I'd also read, I think it was in a letter or something, that the little flower, Therese of Lisieux, had written to someone. And she'd written, or maybe it's in a journal or something, that she'd rather wear a hair shirt than pray the rosary. She'd gotten to that point in her life. And I mentioned that to my spiritual da. And then he was in his mid-80s, or at least, and had been a priest since he was maybe 27, 26 years old, so long time, at least 60 years, or 58 years a priest. And he said, well, she outgrew it. Her natural prayer had become contemplation. The verbal prayer was difficult for her. It was hard. Easier to wear a hair shirt. Or she'd rather wear a hair shirt. It was a struggle. It was an effort. And prayer should not have to be that way. Prayer is our communication with our beloved, with God. It's our communication, and a lot of it's listening. Just picking up nuances, little things, or little images that were shown, or words that might pop in rapidly and just on the peripheral even. Then they're gone. And if we're not listening, we'll know that a word went, or maybe we'll even register what the word was. And then it'll be gone, and then we can't think of it. So it's good to develop a communication in which we're listening. And if we see something, we just naturally take the time to think about it a little bit, like I did with Pseudo Macarius. And I realized this is his nose, this is his face, and I was from beneath, looking up at an angle of part of his nose and his face, his beard, and nice straight nose, and his skin tone and his hair coloring. And the main effect was of the time period in which he lived, of the ruggedness of the life, and the strength that he had, though, of living in that life, and that he was just a regular, wonderful human being, monk, man, my friend, and he's still alive. Not as he was then, probably, I don't know. But I was shown him as a human. And that was the message God wanted to give to me. In prayer, it's not just a one way. It's not, and the verbal and the mental prayers can make it seem like that. We're doing all the talking. It's a one-way thing. And fair enough, a lot of it is prayers of help. We want help, guidance, and also prayers of intercession. We want help for other people or for situations. So, but the other kind of prayer, contemplative prayer, that gets, and meditation also gets more into it, but contemplative prayer is really a relationship with God, a communicative relationship where it's very free-flowing back and forth. And for the most part, we aren't even aware when we're not in that, of anything that transpired. Definitely don't know what we were sharing or talking about, and oftentimes won't know what God said consciously. But it's in us. We'll feel that things progressed or transpired, or that the hour and a half went of painting the ceiling, and the deep inner was communicating back and forth, me to God, God to me, and melded together. So, and then there were other types of prayer. I started what I call kinesthetic tactile prayer. Kinesthetic tactile prayer. And that idea also came from my master's in reading, where we would teach kinesthetic tactile methods of helping children who had a difficult time learning to read. Like something tangible, to have them do some jello that is not fully set, and have them print a word in the jello, or something, or sand, or but the jello was fun because they could lick their finger then after they got in the cherry jello, but it wasn't fully set hard or anything. It was like we had a recipe anyway of the mixture to make, and a big sheet pan, and then they could write on it. Then you just smooth it over with the spatula, and they could do it again. And it was tactile for them, and it was kinesthetic. It was action, movement, motion. So I developed things like that with prayer also. And that's where I got into praying with my manual labor, or with anything I did of tasks, especially difficult things difficult to do that I didn't want to do, which now is, just getting up and moving around. It's prayer effort, it's prayer. And I have to remind myself of that, to set the intention, all for God, omnia pro Deo. But even to get down to more specific, something needs prayer, or someone needs prayer out there that we're aware of, or a group of people. And as I've said, I get prayer ideas from these British mysteries I watch for my recreation, for my release. And it does release me, because good always is winning over in the end of these shows. And it's usually in the evening. So on Amazon Prime, I'll find one. Sometimes they will be directly based on a true story. Other times not, but the writers base them on themes that are going on in the world right now. Like last night was on illegal organ harvesting from people from the Middle East, young people who they would promise a better life in the UK, and then trick them and drug them, and then they would have their organs harvested while they were under anesthetic, and that all their organs would be pre-sold to wealthy people in England. And it goes on in many countries. It goes on in this country. Illegal organ harvesting. And they use vulnerable people for them, for these organs. Young people, healthy and unhealthy. And they dupe them, trick them, that they're preparing them for something better. Yet they'll have a better life. Come with me. Just do this, We're waiting for your new clothes to come. Take your shower. And they'll have them in some facility that's a quasi-hospital or clinic, where they do this covert, illegal, and horribly immoral and unethical murdering of people. But in their minds, they think those people are worthless, that they're doing a great thing by helping someone whose life is going to be worth something. So people get twisted. But all of that now, today, see, I was praying about those situations and the people involved with them. The ones doing it, the ones who are receiving organs and don't realize, or maybe someone does realize, but not, not the parent or something. So, the parent recognizes what they're doing, but for the love of their child, they're willing to break the law to do it. And I just see looks like just make sure my battery's going out. So something's not right here with my, I must have, well, looks like it's on. Anyway, this might end soon because my battery says it's not plugged in. It's going to go to sleep soon. So, but anyway, that's how I get prayer intentions now, through something like that. Or every now and then I'll log on to the news, but 50% of it is Hollywood, so I don't really get as much good out of that as far as what to pray for, of issues out there going on in the world that are broad-based and what I would consider very serious and cover a large amount of people with needs and troubles. Kinesthetic tactile praying. I would do things, attach an action or an activity or an effort of some sort, or helping someone when it would be a difficult situation, even having that be the prayer intention. And in my own way, the better I would do, with the better heart and mind and soul, and the more I would strive in whatever it was I was doing, that would equate with my prayer rising to heaven and being heard or being effective on behalf of someone else. So that I would engage in that kind of praying. But the actual prayer itself, outside of the intention then, would be in the action, and often then the action would become a wordless, imageless experience with God. Say the work I was doing or the effort for someone. Not always. Sometimes I would have to be very aware. If I would be helping an elderly person when I was younger and needing to talk and to make sure they could hear me and listen to them and all of that, to do that to my utmost, helping them. Or massaged one time an old woman's feet. Her husband had died. She was maybe 92, and her toenails were fungal and all this, and I just died to myself, and she just loved having that massage. Her calves and her ankles and her feet and her toes. And same with my mother when she was in the nursing home. I would make it a prayer for something or someone, or for that person, or a combination. But I would do something active and tactile, tangible, as the prayer, as the actual praying part of it. So we just set our intentions and make them good, and for our own hearts to have good intentions. And then I also would have, at times, I would put a list of prayer intentions, say on an entry table. And every time I'd walk back and forth and see it, I would stop and just go down the list. That was earlier on when I was doing more verbal and mental prayer. And I had my hope bowl also, with empty little blank pieces of paper, a pen with no ink in it, and I would tell people, I'd have it out in the entry, and well, what's this? Because they would see folded pieces of paper, and I would put some in myself. I say, well, feel free, write down a hope you have as a prayer, and I will pray for all the hopes in the hope bowl. Every time I go by or think of it, I'll pray. And only one person thought, oh, this is weird and awful, and it was after I was Catholic, and they were very against, so they refused. No, we're not doing anything of the sort. They thought it was some hocus pocus. But it was actually hope that is seen as no hope at all. So they were unseen hopes of prayers, and in faith, I would pray for whatever was in their hearts, written down with no ink, nothing visible, but tangibly, kinesthetically, they wrote, and tangibly folded and put the blank piece of paper in this big, it was a big, beautiful oriental bowl, and I would pray for all those hopes represented. And it was a lovely exercise of prayer. God blessed it. He blessed that. I'm not set up here to have it. I don't have people coming by either, so it'd be nothing I would do here. But just be creative. Be creative with your praying, and come up with various means of prayer. Borrow the kinesthetic tactile praying, and develop it for your own. But otherwise, my prayer for years now has been more of that type of intentions, and then I just have contemplation just automatically transpires when it just is automatic anymore, because prayer has become a relationship, an ongoing relationship of communication with God, back and forth. That's the best I can do to describe it, to the point where sometimes I think, do I even pray anymore? Maybe I don't even pray. But it's a constant, is what it is. It's the prayer without ceasing, I think, that Paul was talking about, where we aren't aware because we have come to love God and the relationship has developed and we are automatically communicating. Our thoughts are all automatically a communication with God. And it probably happens more when you live alone. I don't know. Probably a little more easy. And that's a big thing for hermits. We're to do a lot of praying. And it develops into that type of praying. And listening is part of communicating. So I'll leave it at that, because this is going to go off. I have maybe somehow the plug is out from the wall or something. But this is my prayer life, and I pray that it is praying. And I do have my rosary. I hold it. It's a sacramental. And I haven't recently, so I think about Christ on the cross and stuff. I think of him in the scriptures. I read the scriptures every day. To me, reading the scriptures has become prayer. That's prayer, the living word, because he's communicating with me. God always communicates with me. This morning when I read the psalm, first off, I knew that song, he was talking to me. He was setting the tone. He was understanding. And the gospel also. That also had a message, a prayer, a communication from God to me. And I received it and mentally communicated back with God on it. And, see, anything else? And people who are alive, but dead on earth, but they're alive, living. So that's also communication, prayer. So that's I guess what I can say about my prayer life now, but the scriptures, that keeps me very much in touch with Jesus and with his life and other personages' lives in the Bible, in the scriptures. So it becomes a free-flowing relationship of communication. So I'll leave it at that. Maybe I'm leaving something out, but I had mentioned bilocation in the first video that I did, and anything becomes prayer. That's how it is now. It's all prayer. All prayer. And intention is very important in it. And our relationship with God is the other thing that's key. The relationship and the communicating. Keep communicating with God. Prayer. God bless his real presence in us. And thank you so much for the comments. And do check out the that video on suffering with joy, and also in context with what is joy in God's view. What's joy in God's view? Sort of an interesting prayer to ask God. We'll talk to you later. God bless his real presence in us. His real presence in us. When we recognize he is in us and we are in him, that's prayer also. We're connected, we're communicating, we're relating one with the other. Good night.